December 18th, 1978, 6:17 a.m., Ozone Park, Queens. Parnell Stacks. Edwards was sitting at his kitchen table playing cards with his girlfriend when the door burst open. Tommy DeSimone stepped inside, holding a .38 caliber revolver. Angelo Seppi followed behind him. Stacks looked up. He already knew. 1 week earlier, on December 11th, Jimmy Burke had pulled off the largest cash robbery in American history, the Lufthansa Heist at JFK Airport. More than $5 million in cash, nearly $1 million in jewelry. After the robbery, Burke gave Stacks one responsibility: drive the getaway van to a scrapyard in New Jersey and have it crushed immediately. The van contained fingerprints, fibers, evidence. It had to disappear within hours. Burke made that clear. Stacks never took it to Jersey. Instead, he drove it to his girlfriend's apartment in Ozone Park. He parked it on the street. Then he went inside. Stacks had developed a cocaine habit by 1978. He wasn't a heavy dealer. He wasn't a kingpin. He was a user. That night, instead of dumping the van, he got high, and he fell asleep. The van stayed parked outside for 3 days. On December 14th, police found it. They processed it. Fingerprints were lifted. The investigation expanded. When Jimmy Burke found out, he didn't yell, he didn't argue, he made a decision. Stacks Edwards had become a problem. So on December 18th, Tommy DeSimone walked into that apartment and fired 6 shots. 5 hit Stacks in the face and upper chest. 1 missed and lodged in the wall. The entire hit took seconds. Tommy and Angelo walked out. Calm, efficient. They drove back to Robert's lounge. It's done. Burke nodded. Goodfellas makes it look simple. Stacks forgot the van. Stacks got high. Stacks paid the price. But that's not the full story, because Stacks Edwards wasn't just a screw-up errand boy. He had been a professional boxer. He had trained at Gleason's gym in Brooklyn. He had fought legitimate bouts. He had worked around Muhammad Ali's training camps. He had structure once. He had discipline. So how does a man who once lived inside championship gyms end up executed over a parked van? That's the part the movie never showed you, and it starts long before Lufthansa. Parnell Stephen Edwards was born July 19, 1950, in Brooklyn, New York. He grew up in Brownsville. In the 1960s, Brownsville wasn't just tough. It was unstable, high crime rates, underfunded schools, few economic opportunities. If you weren't careful, the street raised you faster than your parents could. Stacks wasn't born into a crime family. His father worked factory jobs. His mother cleaned houses. They weren't connected. They weren't protected. They were working class and stretched thin like most families in that neighborhood. What Stacks did have was athletic ability. By 14, he was already over 6 feet tall, lean, quick hands, fast reflexes. He got into street fights like most kids in Brownsville did, but one of those fights changed his direction. A local trainer saw him throw punches and told him something simple: if you're going to fight, you might as well get paid for it. Stacks started training at Gleason's gym in Brooklyn at 15 years old. Gleason's wasn't a neighborhood hobby gym. It was one of the most respected boxing facilities in New York. Real fighters trained there, real prospects. If you lasted there, it meant something. Stacks lasted. He wasn't a superstar. He wasn't the next champion. But he was disciplined. He showed up on time. He trained 6 days a week. He ran in the mornings. He sparred in the evenings. Boxing gave him structure. For a kid from Brownsville, structure was everything. By 19, Stacks turned professional. He fought as a lightweight, around 135 pounds. Between 1969 and 1974, he fought 14 professional bouts. His record: 7 wins, 5 losses, 2 draws. Not elite, but legitimate. He wasn't getting title shots. He wasn't headlining arenas. He was what boxing calls a journeyman, the kind of fighter who fills cards, takes tough fights, and earns modest purses. In the early 1970s, a journeyman could earn anywhere from $500 to $2,000 per fight. If you fought 4 times a year, you might clear $8,000 before expenses. That wasn't wealth, but it was honest, and for a few years, it was enough. Here's where his story brushes against greatness. During the early 1970s, Muhammad Ali trained in New York and Pennsylvania for several major fights. Training camps were chaotic. Reporters, fans, sparring partners, trainers, hangers-on, dozens of people moved in and out of those gyms daily. Allie's team needed extra bodies around camp, not Secret Service-level security, just big, disciplined fighters who could control crowds and keep things organized. Stax Edwards was one of those guys. He wasn't Allie's personal bodyguard. He wasn't part of the inner circle. He didn't travel to fights. But he worked around those camps. He stood near doors. He moved people out of the way. He kept unauthorized visitors from disrupting sessions. For a kid from Brownsville, that proximity mattered. He was inside rooms where greatness existed. He watched Allie train. He watched champions prepare. He saw what discipline looked like at the highest level. And for a while, it felt like he was on that path too. But proximity isn't the same as progress. By 1974, Stax's career stalled. His record wasn't improving. He wasn't knocking opponents out. He wasn't drawing crowds. Promoters stopped offering better purses. And boxing is unforgiving. If you're not rising, you're drifting. By 1975, he was 25 years old. For a lightweight fighter, that's not young anymore. He started missing training sessions. He skipped sparring appointments. The discipline that had defined him for 10 years started to erode. Without steady fights, the money dried up. Without money, the pressure increased. He tried legitimate work, construction jobs, nightclub security, odd labor shifts, but 10 years of boxing had conditioned him for something else. He was trained for controlled violence, not routine employment. That's when the structure disappeared. And when structure disappears, bad habits fill the space. By 1977, Stax had developed a cocaine habit. At first, it was casual, recreational, something to pass time. But cocaine in the late 1970s was expensive, and addiction doesn't care about your professional record. He needed money, not boxing money, fast money. And fast money in Queens didn't come from gyms. It came from bars like Robert's Lounge. That's where the shift happened, from disciplined fighter to desperate earner. And once that shift happens, it's hard to reverse. Because in boxing, if you lose a fight, you train harder. In organized crime, if you lose control, you lose your life. And Stax was about to enter a world where discipline no longer protected him. By 1977, Stax Edwards was no longer a professional fighter. He was a former fighter. That difference matters. In boxing, once the calls stop coming, they don't restart. Promoters moved on. Trainers focused on younger prospects. The gym that once felt like structure now felt like memory. Stax was 27 years old, too old to be a prospect, too broke to wait for another opportunity, too proud to admit it was over. That's when Queens became more important than Brooklyn, specifically South Ozone Park, Robert's Lounge. On the surface, it was just a neighborhood bar. Inside, it was a hub. Jimmy Burke operated out of that room. Burke wasn't a made man. He was an associate of the Lucchese crime family. But in practice, that distinction didn't limit his power. He ran hijacking operations, cargo theft, loan sharking, and fencing stolen goods. He made serious money. More importantly, he controlled people. Burke needed drivers. He needed muscle. He needed men who could follow instructions without asking questions. He did not need independent thinkers. He needed availability. Stax Edwards was available. Big, athletic, known in the neighborhood, no steady income, no family connections inside organized crime, no rank. That made him useful. Burke didn't bring Stax into the inner circle. He didn't sit him at the main table. He gave him small jobs: drive this car, pick up that package, stand by the door, move these boxes. Stax wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even formally an associate. He was hired help, paid in cash. $200 for a night's work, $500 for something riskier. Sometimes more if the job was bigger. For a man who had been earning a few thousand a year in boxing, it felt like money again. It felt like movement. It felt like importance. That's how it starts. You don't join organized crime because you wake up wanting to be a gangster. You join because the cash is immediate and because someone powerful is willing to use you. By early 1978, Stax was doing regular errands for Burke's crew. He drove vehicles during hijackings. He helped move stolen merchandise. He stood guard when needed. He wasn't trusted with planning. He wasn't told everything. But he was around, close enough to feel included, close enough to believe he mattered. That's the dangerous part. Because in a criminal hierarchy, proximity is not protection. There are levels: boss, underboss, captain, soldier, associate. Stacks wasn't even officially at the bottom. He was outside the structure, day labor with a criminal twist, and day laborers are disposable. Jimmy Burke understood this better than anyone. Burke had grown up in foster homes. He had built his position through calculation and violence. He trusted almost no one. He didn't keep loose ends. If someone became a risk, they were removed, not out of anger, out of control. By late 1978, Burke was planning something bigger than hijacked trucks. The Lufthansa heist, December 11, 1978. John F. Kennedy International Airport. Over $5 million in cash, nearly $900,000 in jewelry. The largest cash robbery in American history at the time. Stacks wasn't part of the planning. He wasn't inside the meetings. But after the heist, he was given a responsibility, not because he was important, because he was available. The getaway van had to disappear immediately. It contained fingerprints, fibers, evidence that could tie the crew to the robbery. Burke controlled a scrapyard in New Jersey. The plan was simple. Drive the van there within hours. Have it crushed. Eliminate the trail. Stacks cut for handling it. $10,000. That was more than he made in a year boxing. But here's the critical detail. By 1978, Stacks's cocaine use wasn't casual anymore. It was dependency. Burke knew it. The crew knew it. Stacks was not the most reliable man in the room. Which raises the question, why give the most important post-heist job to the least stable person available? The answer is uncomfortable, because Burke didn't need reliability. He needed flexibility. If Stacks succeeded, good. If Stacks failed, even better. Because a man who knows too much and has no protection is already a problem, and problems eventually get solved. 3 days after the heist, the van was still parked outside Stacks's girlfriend's apartment. 3 days. It sat there while he got high inside. On December 14th, police found it. They processed it. Fingerprints were lifted. The investigation expanded. And from that moment forward, Stacks Edwards was no longer useful. He was a liability. And in Jimmy Burke's world, liabilities don't get second chances. They get removed. When police found the van on December 14th, the damage was already done. Fingerprints were lifted. Evidence was logged. The FBI officially had something physical to work with. Jimmy Burke didn't panic. He calculated. Stacks had parked the van outside his girlfriend's apartment and left it there for 3 days while he got high. That was the surface mistake. But the real issue wasn't incompetence. It was exposure. Stacks knew the crew. He knew who was involved. He knew where the money went. He knew what happened after the robbery. And he had no rank, no protection, no family backing him, no leverage. Men like Jimmy Burke didn't keep liabilities around. They eliminated them. The official reason was simple. He failed to dump the van. But even if he had crushed it in New Jersey that morning, nothing else would have changed. Burke was already cleaning house. Anyone connected to Lufthansa who could become a problem was being removed. Quietly. Efficiently. Stacks wasn't being punished, he was being reduced. Reduced from participant to loose end. And loose ends don't stay loose in organized crime. They get cut. On December 18th, Tommy DeSimone did exactly what Burke expected him to do. 6 shots. Less than 15 seconds. No emotion, no discussion. Stacks Edwards wasn't killed because he was the worst man in the room. He was killed because he was the easiest man to remove. And that's the part Goodfellas never explained.